We're on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and I'd like to give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. So if we haven't met before, my name is Samantha Lego. I'm Keela's marketing director. Now, Keela is a fundraising specific technology company, and like many of you, our team has been working remotely for just over 2 years now. 2 years and 1 day to be precise, but who's counting? Within that time, our team has grown, our responsibilities have evolved, and a lot of us have found ourselves wearing more and more hats as work from every angle has slowly crept up onto our plate. I hope that sounds familiar to some of you. So our presenter today is Keela's Chief Operating Officer, Tassie Gottschlag. And as her title suggests, she's a leader in helping organizations streamline their operations. Her session today is about ruthless prioritization, and more specifically, the concept of essentialism, which suggests we should relentlessly pursue less, but pursue better. She'll teach you how to invest your time wisely by learning how to identify the right tasks that deserve your focused effort. Furthermore, she will give you some techniques for minimizing your to-do list while also achieving more. And so with that, I will pass it off to you, Tassie.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so as Sam said, today's workshop is built around the idea or practice called essentialism. And this term is actually coined in a book by the same name written by Greg McKeown. I absolutely recommend it if you're interested in learning a bit more. And what I've done is I've pulled in concepts from a number of fantastic business and management books that I feel really support this practice of essentialism. So let's take a look at what essentialism is. Okay, so we're always trying to do more. I'm sure everyone can relate, whether it's more in a week, a day, more in an hour. We want to reach new goals. We want to grow in our career. Everyone does. So what we do is we simply try to squeeze in more working hours, more hours at the gym, hopefully more family time. But at what cost? At sleep? Is it personal time that's not getting what it needs? And the reality is we can't keep doing more forever. It's just not possible. So what I'd like to do in the workshop today is really challenge this idea. And I'm sure you've all heard the saying, everyone has the same 24 hours in a day, right? So how is it then with those 24 hours that some people are so darn productive and successful, and yet others are overwhelmed and struggling just getting to the basics? So what I want to share today is this idea called essentialism, and it really is a shift in thinking. Instead of trying to do it all, you actually learn to only do the things that matter most. And you may, in this process, actually shift and end up doing less, but I'm kind of getting ahead of things here. So I want to show you, first of all, how to accomplish more without doing more. And that's what we're going to spend most of today's workshop covering. Okay. Only once you give yourself permission to stop doing it all, to stop saying yes to everyone, can you actually make your highest contribution towards the things that really matter? Okay, so this is an important first step. You need to give yourself permission to stop trying to do it all. It's a psychological first step, but it's a really important one, and I'm sure one that many of the people here can relate to. So in this concept of essentialism, the people that practice are called essentialists, okay? So essentialists, what they do is they relentlessly pursue less, but pursue better. It's quite a simple idea. And it's this idea that quality over quantity is important, but it's more than just quality. It's high quality on the right things, okay? So essentialists pause constantly. They have to, they pause and they say, okay, am I investing in the right activities? They know they only have a limited amount of time and resources. We all have only 24 hours in our day, so no one can do it all. And what essentialists do differently is they actually eliminate the non-essential, what they call the trivial, from their to-do lists. They eliminate these things entirely. And instead they focus on what they call the vital few tasks, these vital few tasks that are actually going to bring them closer to their goals. So the next logical question, how do you decide what these vital few tasks are, right? So that's what we're going to spend most of today digging into. And I'm going to give you lots of tips and tricks and approaches to really clarifying what your vital few tasks are. Because once you've got them, once you know your vital few and you feel pretty confident, we're actually going to take it one step further. I'm going to ask you to actually order your vital few tasks from the absolute most important to the least important of the vital few. You're going to get crystal clear on your priorities. We're going to be ruthless about prioritization. Okay, so we're going to start with a quick activity, okay? And this is going to be important. This is really going to set the stage for the workshop. So please, please, if you're watching and kind of doing other things, try to do this. It's going to be pretty eye-opening for you. So what are your goals? I want you to write down your top 5 goals for your team, your department. Maybe it's personal goals for the next 3 months. Okay, this is not your life goals or your year goals, just for the next 3 months. Okay, your top 5 goals. And then you're going to put them in order of importance with the most important at the top. And I'm going to give you exactly 2 minutes to do this. That's not a lot of time. Okay, go for it. Top 5 goals for the next 3 months in order of importance. All right, you got 1 more minute. All right, final few seconds. Are they in order from most to least important? All right, stop there. Okay, so I'm curious to hear how many of you were able to come up with your top 5 goals in order of importance and get them done within that quick amount of time. Can you maybe write in, we've got the question box and hopefully I can see, okay, only 4, I got 4, yes, amazing. Perfect, did anyone struggle? Did anyone find it challenging to do 5 goals in order that quickly? I see a few no's in here. Okay, I will tell you, this group is better than most. I've done this activity before and I can tell you I was not expecting everyone to be able to write down their top 5 goals in order in such a short amount of time. It's amazing if you can do that. You're ahead and this entire workshop is going to be easier for you. Okay, so what I want to emphasize for anyone that struggled to get them down or for anyone who wrote down 5 goals but weren't sure that those were the top 5. Right? How do you know those are the top 5 and not, 5 goals out of a potential 10 goals that you could be working towards? So what I wanted to really hit home here, and we're going to come back to your goals kind of frequently and think about them throughout this workshop, so maybe keep them in front of you. But I wanted to hit home this idea that if we're going to become masters at prioritizing and focusing on what really is those essential few tasks, we really need to be crystal clear about our goals. They need to be in our minds at all times. We need to know as an individual and as a team, especially, what we're working towards and why. That's the only way. So, more than 80% of the results that you achieve are from a few key activities that you do in your day and in your week. And it's up to you to then relentlessly test and measure to determine which activities these few that are getting you most of your results, and then to stop doing all the rest. Because sometimes you're going to have to make trade-offs, and this is a reality. Trade-offs are hard. There's two things, you need to get them done. You have the same amount of time allocated. You can only get one done. Which one do you choose? Okay. You might have to drop a project to focus on another more important one because trade-offs are necessary. We talked about this idea, if you try to do it all, you actually do nothing well. So if you start to notice that you're making a lot of trade-offs, I want you to consider that's probably a positive sign that you're starting to apply essentialism. You're starting to think, which thing matters more? And I'm going to give you some techniques for choosing trade-offs and figuring out how to make the right trade-offs. Because without trade-offs, you're trying to do it all, okay? So trade-offs are a good sign. Okay, so where do you start? When I started to apply these elements of essentialism, I found the most helpful and oddly challenging first step was really this shift in thinking. And I had to start thinking about my day as a choice. So what does that mean? You know how when people say, what do you have to do today? And you say, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. Well, I want to challenge you to start thinking or even saying, I choose to do this. I choose to do X, Y, and Z today, rather than I have to. And what this does is you're quickly going to see that the simple change in semantics will shift your view of your task list. Okay, you're going to start to tell yourself you choose to do something, because telling yourself you have to do something, you're forfeiting your right to choose. By exercising your power of choice, you're actively choosing these things. You're reminding yourself of your goals every time. Maybe it's subconscious, maybe it's subtle, but you're reminding yourself that you're actually prioritizing. Even if we don't consciously know, by creating a to-do list and working through it, we're prioritizing. We're just doing it subconsciously. And so really want to challenge you to start speaking and thinking this way. And if you choose to do some little thing, something that doesn't make a big impact, and we're going to talk about this more, but like editing a document or reviewing someone's email for, grammar and spelling, you might suddenly realize that that's not an activity that's really going to be the best use of your time, considering your goals. Remember, we always come back to your goals. And if you're choosing to rework a project, for example, that you've been working on for months that, probably is ready to go out, maybe you start to see that this reworking of a project is actually procrastination, and you're doing it for other reasons, not because it's the best use of your time. So it's a subtle shift, but it's an important one. Start considering your to-do list, your choice. What am I choosing? Okay, so then how do you decide which activities to choose? Which ones deserve your attention? And it all comes back to your goals. So which activity will move you and your team closer to your goals? And this is a technique that I found really helpful. When faced with a trade-off, ask yourself this question: which problem do I want? Trade-offs essentially are always going to cause they're going to cause problems because one won't be done, okay? So let's go back to this example that I gave you of reviewing a blog or editing an email, okay, for spelling and grammar. It's basically a metaphor that I'm going to use consistently throughout this workshop for those annoying little tasks that we often have to get done, maybe for someone else or for someone on our team. And let's say you have two tasks: blog review, editing, and then planning for an upcoming team meeting. Okay, both of these tasks might take 30 to 45 minutes. Both seem important. If you ask yourself, which problem do I want? You start thinking about it differently, right? Which problem do I want? Well, what happens if you simply don't review the blog? What problem is created? Well, some readers might find a spelling mistake and think poorly of your organization. And that's a problem, for sure. What happens if you don't plan for your next team meeting and ensure that your team is aligned around all your main goals? Well, you might have individuals working on the wrong things or prioritizing the wrong things for many days or weeks afterwards. And I can guarantee you that is a far bigger problem. So here's the catch. Most people, most of us, will choose to review and edit the blog. Why? Why do they choose that task when it's so obviously not the best use of their time? Well, I can tell you, it has a satisfying completion. We feel productive and others see our work, right? We're handing it back to the person that asked us to do the edit. Yet, when we're managing a team, aligning everyone around common goals and making sure everyone understands the purpose so that they can prioritize is almost always going to have the bigger return. It might be a harder task. In fact, I guarantee it's a harder task. It requires more creative thinking, right? But that darn blog editing is going to nag at us. So we say, I'll just get this off my plate first, but then the planning session never happens. So all I want to say here is that you're going to choose constantly to do certain things and to spend your time on things. And I want you to make sure that you're choosing to edit that blog or whatever that little task is before you give it 1 ounce of your time. Okay, so this is the focusing question. And I just want to say, if there is one takeaway that you get from this workshop, this would be it. This would be the most powerful thing. And I'll tell you a story about kind of how I applied this. So the focusing question is simply, what is the one thing, if I do nothing else today, that will move me closest to my goal? I'm going to say that over and over and over, just to make sure it sinks in. So you're going to hear that again. Now, I'll tell you my story, how I use the focusing question, because it was a pretty powerful moment. I had just joined Keela as the COO, and of course, we're a software company, so this might not relate to your nonprofit organizations, but there were so many things I needed to address, so many areas I wanted to jump into. So I couldn't necessarily jump in and work with the sales team and the marketing team and the customer care team all at once. And I needed to address different elements in each. So when I first started, our marketing team was painfully short-staffed. We had half the people we needed. And what I was trying to do was kind of plug holes and help out because they needed the help. And so I was spending my days reviewing and editing blogs. Now you can see where that example comes from. And I was doing this so that we could get the blogs out, so we could, produce our content for our community and for our sector. And I had, in the day in question, the day that we're talking about right now, I had 3 more blogs to edit. I had 1 blog to write, and I had 25 more things on my to-do list for that day. And here's the catch. If I really focused, if I was really, really on point that day, I could actually get it all done. I was pretty confident, and it would have felt incredibly satisfying to check that massive to-do list off, put it away, and go home for the day. Okay. But I stopped in that moment, and I asked myself the focusing question. What is the one thing, if I do nothing else today, that will move me closest to my goal? And I paused, because my goal at that time was to get our marketing team back on track after we had switched from outbound to inbound marketing. So shift in strategy. And we really needed to get this marketing engine back running again. We needed a leader who understood how to do that. So what is the one thing, if I did nothing else that day, that would move me closest to my goal? It certainly wasn't writing and editing blogs. I put everything else aside, and I began reviewing resumes for our director of marketing. And that was the day that I found Sam. Now, all of those other tasks needed to be done. They didn't just disappear. But what I realized in that moment was that procrastinating on the single largest and most important task, which is recruiting and hiring our director of marketing, I was actually ensuring that nothing would change. I was ensuring that I wouldn't hit our goals until I found that right person to lead the marketing team and help us reimagine our inbound marketing strategy. And it was hard, right? What problem do you want to have? Some of these problems were going to start mounting and coming up in the short term. I had to stall the blogs going out. I had to tell others they had to wait because hiring takes a lot of time. But it was the single most important task on my list. And I knew that as soon as I asked myself this focusing question. So, what is the one thing, if you do nothing else today, that will move you closest to your goal? Okay, let's talk about how we can discern this trivial many from what we call the vital few. So to understand what you need to focus on, you actually need to take a step back. You need to pause. You need to consider your actual situation and your actual goals. And then from this pause, this moment of pause, clarity often will arise. Okay? How many of us resist the pause, the thinking, the moment of calm because we're so busy? But I actually argue that if you take these moments of pause and then you combine this with some of these other things I've mentioned, this idea that you're choosing your next task. And then you layer on top the focusing question. What's the one thing you can do today to move you closest to your goal? Suddenly, your priorities start to present themselves as rather obvious. They just sort of come up from beneath and they present themselves to you. And you're going to start to see the things that are actually a waste of your time. What tasks you are actually using to just feel productive and busy, right? But they're not actually moving you closer to your goals. And you knew that. Subconsciously, you know it. So my personal example, I teach management training at my company, and we have a team of leaders, and I create content to teach them and help them grow as leaders. And I can tell you that prepping my workshop and training my team, it can sometimes feel pretty daunting. It's a big task, and it can easily and quickly become deprioritized when I have, immediate things that need to be done, or sales numbers I need to focus on, or whatever it might be that's really competing for my attention. And I know deep down that growing and developing our team, and especially our team of leaders, is probably the most valuable use of my time. But sometimes I let the busy work get in the way. And it's not that I don't enjoy making these workshops and this content. I actually love it, but it's hard. It's hard work, and it takes a lot of creative energy. So sometimes the busy work is actually easier to say yes to, and that's okay. You don't have to say no all the time, but you have to be honest with yourself about why you're choosing that work. And to make sure that you're remembering that it's a choice. Remember, think, which problem do I want to have? Untrained leadership team, or a few blogs that are not edited, right? So make sure you're honest. And when you're doing the busy work because your brain needs a break, that's okay. Just do it consciously. Okay, so let's talk about putting some of these ideas into action, some ways that you can really get a lot out of this, because this will take time and practice. So one of the best ways to learn and grow is reflection, right? And reflection is usually done best when we write things down. I know that journaling has been extremely popular lately in kind of self-help and self-development, and I'd like to suggest that we get a journal for work, and we actually keep it as something that we use to reflect on in our work day to day. We make time. Remember, we talked about pausing and reflecting and pausing and thinking. This is a great way to ensure that you create those pause moments. And you reflect, you write things down in your journal, whether it's a challenge you're facing or something you'd like to incorporate in your day to day and you're not sure how. Something that triggers an emotion in you is usually a note that you should make a journal entry. And it doesn't have to be long. I mean, this could take literally 1 to 3 minutes a day. I think my longest journal entry took 5 minutes. I buy these tiny little journals so that I don't feel obligated to write a full page or waste a full page, and it works really well for me. But what this does is it actually gives your mind space to think. It slows the pace down just enough for your mind to really do the good, important work. And then what you do is you go back and you review your journal. You review it every 30 to 90 days, depending on how frequently you're writing, and you start to look for trends. Okay, so you start seeing what's emerging. You might be surprised. You might look at a journal entry that you wrote 30 days earlier and say, wow, I can't believe that bothered me 30 days ago. That's not a long time, and yet I've already grown past that. I already see that as kind of not a big deal because I know how to handle it now. So you're actually recognizing your growth and you're seeing it happen in real time. And it's a pretty liberating feeling. Or maybe you're looking 90 days back and you're starting to see, my goodness, I'm talking about the same problem almost every time for 90 days. This is something I need to spend some time figuring out. This is not fixing itself. I'm not able to fix this without some conscious effort. So what you do is you start to see the growth. You start to recognize areas where there's roadblocks. And these moments of self-reflection as they relate to your work are actually going to help you develop as a manager and as a leader much faster than any single training session or any single workshop that you can go to. This is where the work happens. So I want to give you some starting points for your journal. Little moments of reflection are amazing. There's also some questions that you can start with, questions that will help you really get focused. And one of the activities that I think is great for journaling is something called finding your team's essential intent. So what this is, it could also be called your team's mission statement. I think people are more familiar with that term. But how you determine this is you ask yourself, if we could be truly excellent at only one thing, what would it be? Only one thing. Everyone knows that we need all these skills to be effective, but what would the one thing be? Remember, ruthless prioritization. So once you clarify what this one thing would be, your essential intent should actually drive productivity in your team because everyone knows how to prioritize. Everyone can get crystal clear on what is and isn't a priority because they know what's most important, okay? So once you've asked yourself that, if we could be truly excellent at one thing, there's some other questions you can ask. And these are all kind of in and around this area. It'll just help you figure out your priorities and get focused. And then I highly recommend communicating this to your team frequently and consistently so that everyone can be brought into the same idea of where your priorities lie, what your purpose is, and what your team's essential intent is. So additional questions to add clarity might be, once you've got your essential intent, how do we know, or how do you know that you've succeeded? How do you measure it? What does that show up as? And then some other ideas for prioritizing and making trade-offs, and these are great journaling questions. If I weren't already invested in this project, how much would I invest in it now? We're going to talk about sunk costs in a minute for anyone who's unfamiliar. This kind of touches on that idea. If you're starting fresh, how much would I invest now? That's a quick way to understand if you should drop something from your to-do list altogether. And finally, what else could I use this time and money for? Again, that removes assumptions, that creates creativity. Okay. So on the last slide, we spoke about finding your team's essential intent. I think that was pretty clear. That's going to be a good activity for everyone. And what I'd like to talk about here is what happens when your team does not know their essential intent. They have a lack of clarity of purpose. They're not clear on goals and they don't know what direction they're going, okay? What happens? And I want to talk about these, no one's going to step up and say, hey, I'm not clear on our purpose, or the goals are a little foggy for me. They're going to keep working. They're going to try their best. But what's going to happen is there's going to be this lack of clarity, confusion, stress, frustration is going to start creeping into your team. And the way that shows up, and I want to tell you this because I think everyone's seen this in other organizations, if not your own, there's two common patterns, okay? The first one is team members start putting all of their effort into looking better than their peers rather than actually getting this essential work done, rather than trying to further the organization's mission, okay? And the second thing is that team members start working on tasks that are going to advance their own short-term personal interests. So they're not actually looking at the big picture. So they either start competing with each other or just trying to further their own short-term interests. They're not considering the overall results that the team needs to achieve because that's not clear for them. Okay, but these natural outcomes are going to start to indicate to you there's a lack of clarity of purpose, there's a lack of alignment around goals, and that essential intent activity could be a great place to start to get your team back into clarity of purpose, and everyone can start moving in the same direction. The questions are the answer. Okay, so remember when I asked you to write down your top 5 goals, and I asked you if you were sure, like, are those your top 5 goals, not just any goals? So that's something that we come up against a lot. If you're really comfortable setting goals, you're probably pretty good at it. You can come up with goals, you put them on paper, and that's great. But how do you know if those are the right goals? It's something that I struggle with all the time. How do we know that we're focusing on the right things and we're not leaving something out that could be really important for our team and our organization? Okay, so we've spent this whole workshop talking about choosing your vital few important things. So we're going to talk about a different way that you can creatively unlock new avenues, new roads, new solutions. Sometimes these real issues that we should be targeting and we should be setting goals around are actually just beneath the surface. They're not yet totally evident. So I want to introduce you to a technique that's been highly praised. It's a technique for problem solving. And the reason that I'm including it in this workshop on ruthless prioritization is that we need to be sure we're spending our precious time. We've talked about how precious it is on the right activities. And if ruthless prioritization is gonna work and make us successful, we have to make sure our goals are the right goals, okay? So this is a book I found. It's phenomenal. I highly recommend it. One of the most popular classes at MIT and Stanford is a course based on this book. And it's written by Hal Gregerson, and it's simply called The Questions Are the Answer. And the premise of this book is that asking the right questions is more important than finding the right answer. He basically teaches that better questions unlock better answers. Now, I want to show you a way to do this. We're going to actually do this activity today, and it's something that I do a lot at Keela. We've done it very successfully to unlock things when we're really stuck or unsure of which way to go. Rather than ignoring it altogether and choosing different goals, we spend some time on the issue. We creatively unlock better questions. So I'm going to walk you through how to do this. So a little bit of context before we do our activity. Gregerson writes about something called catalytic questions. And catalytic questions are questions that act as a catalyst. So what they do is they open up new ways of thinking. And they do this because they get rid of assumptions that we don't even know we've held. Assumptions subconsciously keep us in one frame of thought, and they actually prevent us from being creative. And sometimes it prevents us from actually seeing the best path forward. So he argues that if we can ask better questions, then we can find better solutions. It almost seems too simple, but you have to start with the questions. So how do we ask better questions? Okay, because better questions are gonna energize the team. They're gonna make the conversations feel inspired. We're gonna have new ways of thinking. And this is all because it's gonna challenge these assumptions that are keeping us blind to better ways of doing things. So he talks about reframing. We're going to come back to that in a second. A reframing question is a question that has the power to move these assumptions. So the activity is called a question burst. And I'm going to walk you through how to do it. We're going to do it today on this call, on this workshop. And what we're going to do is, as a group, and I recommend you do this with your team, it can feel, as you're going through it, you're like, oh, is this going to work? Is my team going to get anything from this? And then at the end, you're like, wow, that was brilliant. I didn't even see that coming, but out of left field, this amazing question emerged, and all of a sudden, we're thinking about this problem in a different way. So I really recommend you do this with your team. And if you have a small group, you can spend 4 to 5 minutes creating questions. And if you have a larger group, like today, we're just going to spend 2 to 3 minutes of question generation. And what we're basically going to do is we're going to generate as many questions as we can about a problem statement. And I'm going to give you this problem statement in a moment. Okay, so here's our problem statement, okay? We want to generate double the amount of donations from our existing donor base. How can we do this? A little bit of context, okay? We have a really dedicated donor base. Most people have given about the same amount every year. And what we really want to do is increase our average gift size from the existing donor base that we have. We're not looking to recruit or find new donors, okay? So now, this is really a fundraising problem. And I know we have people on this call today from every department. Some of these organizations here probably don't even fundraise. And I will argue that this is actually the best kind of group to do this question burst with. Because if we only do this activity with the fundraising team, they often share similar perspectives and similar assumptions. So what we want is diversity for this to work well. So if you're going to do this with your team in your organization, bring in people from all different departments. If you can bring in people that have no idea even what you're doing or what the concept is, sometimes they come up with the best questions because they have fresh angles. And we're actually seeking these crazy, potentially dumb questions. Okay, so if you have nothing to do with fundraising, especially if your organization doesn't fundraise, I actually want to hear from you, especially from you, because you are most likely to come up with the reframing questions that the fundraising team might have too many assumptions to even see. Okay. Before we begin, there's some rules. No solutions. We can't answer anything. We're going to throw up questions, okay? No explanations or preamble. You don't need to justify your question, and that's easier to do when you're doing this in person, when you're talking with your team. So keep an eye on that if you do this afterwards with your organization. The simpler the question, the better. Dumb questions are great. Sometimes questions that feel dumb are actually reframing really well. And of course, reframing questions are the best. And remember, reframing questions are the questions that have the power to remove one or more of the assumptions in a line of thinking. The things that are givens, the things that you assume, well, that's a dumb question because this. Well, what if that didn't exist? Okay, let's give this a shot. Are you ready? So we're going to start with the problem. And remember, the problem is we want to generate double the amount of donations from our existing donor base. How can we do this? Okay, that's the problem statement. And all you're going to do is ask questions, throwing questions in and around this problem statement. Now, before we begin, it's a quick activity, okay? I want you to tell me, write down in the question box, how do you feel about this problem? What's your gut telling you? Do you feel positive, neutral, anxious, creative, excited? Throw a note down. Hopeful, solvable, anxious, excited, creative. Awesome. Okay. So we're going to have 2 to 3 minutes to generate as many questions as possible about this challenge. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to watch and I'm going to read out any questions that I feel are especially reframing. I'll read out ones that come up that I can see. And afterwards, we're going to check in about this, okay? Go ahead. Oh, I can't see them all. I'm wondering if Marina, maybe you can read them out. Oh, there we go. Maybe I can make it bigger. Okay, who is the existing donor base? Have you asked the donors for more money? Right? Good question. That's a reframing question. Have we asked? How do we inspire our donors? Why does it have to be from the existing donor base? Good question. Why aren't we seeking new donors? What are our current donation follow-up process? Why do people give the same amount each year? What is stopping the donors from donating more? Good question. How often are we engaging with our current donors? Fantastic. Why do people give? Why would they give less? Who are the existing donors? What fields, what roles? What does the organization do? That could be a reframing question for sure. Is it reasonable to expect our existing donors to give more? Are we asking too much? Should this be a question we're asking? Why are they not already donating more? Again, these are great questions, by the way. A lot of these reframe the way we were thinking about it, right? So I want to see if there's any other big reframing questions. Who are the donors? Interesting idea. Have we tried crowdsourcing or funding? Crowdsourcing for funding? Who is our donor base? These are fantastic. Okay. Have we used social media with donors? How old are our donors? What is their age? What did the donors care about? I like that one a lot. When did they give last? Do we know who they are? What's their age group? Why are we focusing on existing donors? Again, why is this the problem statement? Should we expand the problem statement? Why would they want to give more? What is the gift size? How are we going to measure this? Very good question. What appeals do they respond to the most? Is our work still relevant? Good reframing question. Very important reframing question. Is there a reason they're not giving more? Is our work still relevant? What is the money for? How do we contact them? These are fantastic. Okay, we've got lots of questions here, and this is a fantastic example. I've read some of the questions out that I think are reframing, and we could go on for 5-10 minutes, and I highly would recommend when you do this with your team, keep going until you feel like the questions are starting to peter out. Sometimes the reframing questions come at the end. okay? So what you do now is you take all of these questions, you look at them, you put them on a piece of paper and you start to sort them. You're actually going to look for trends. You're going to look for, are there a whole bunch of questions that kind of fit in the same category? What categories emerge? You start to move them around. You start to think, which ones are the most reframing? And then you come back with your team and you start to talk about the trends, the categories that emerged, and maybe which reframing questions you want to start discussing in depth. And what's going to happen is all of a sudden this way you've thought about this problem, could be years, it could be a lifetime. All of a sudden it's going to open up and you're going to think about it in a completely different way. This is how your creativity will emerge. And I can tell you, like, companies in Silicon Valley, like the most creative, innovative companies in Silicon Valley, use this technique all the time with their innovation teams. It works really well and it helps our brains to think differently. And this is how you truly get innovative and clear around potentially what your goals could be, which path you want to be following. Okay, now really quickly before we move past this, I want to take another quick gut check. How are you feeling about the problem now? Has anything changed? Do you feel any differently than you did before? Hopeful, solvable, possible, relieved, inspired, more confident? You know, it's interesting. They actually recommend doing this feeling check before and after a question burst. And at first I thought it was a little hokey. And then I did it myself and I was like, wow, I really do feel better. And it's something about having these creative, mind-opening conversations where you actually feel a little more in control. You don't feel like you're kind of blocked in with all of these assumptions. You actually feel like, I can do this now. I can figure this out because you've had that creativity burst. So I really recommend doing this whenever you're stuck on something, whenever you really want to dig in and make sure that the path that you've set and the goals that you've set, it's the right path, the right goals for you. Okay. So after, we've already talked about this. I told you all about this. Can we put them in categories, remember, and figure out if any of these trends are emerging? I think we've pretty much talked about all of this. Yes, we have. I'll jump through. Okay. So I want to talk next about something called sunk cost fallacy. So a sunk cost, many of you know exactly what this is. Some people might be rusty. It's just a cost that's already been spent that can never be recovered. And what we often do is we often stick with an initiative because we think we'll eventually get a return. We want to make sure we're not going to have to admit to wasting all that money, even if we can probably see right now that it's not likely we'll ever get a return. And what happens is teams and individuals fall prey to this sunk cost fallacy, and we stick with things for too long. Okay, I want to tell you a quick story. So there's something called the Concorde fallacy. And in 1956, the French and the British engine makers, in collaboration with their governments, they were involved in the Concorde project. And they wanted to develop this new, faster plane. But long before the project was over, it was clear to everyone that financial gains for the plane, once it was in use, could never offset the costs. The costs were astronomical. I think it was equivalent to 22 billion Canadian dollars. And yet the project continued on for years. And remember, these people aren't like curing cancer or doing something for humanity. They're creating a faster commercial plane. They put so much into this. No one wanted to seem like a failure. So they continued putting billions more, even after they knew it would never have a positive return on investment. It couldn't have a positive return. So they actually now teach this concept in business school. It's this concept of chasing sunk costs, and they call it the Concorde fallacy. And the reason I'm telling you about this is if teams of engineers and French and British governments can fall prey to chasing sunk costs, I assure you that you can, and I can as well. So it's easy to look at the scenario and think, well, that was dumb. Why would they do that? Afterthought, right? So I guarantee you, we're doing it and we're not realizing it. So being aware of what a sunk cost is and when it makes more sense to just cut your losses and let that investment be gone so that you can spend your time on the things that really matter. It helps you choose what to prioritize and helps you feel more confident that you're investing in the vital few and you're not chasing sunk costs. Okay, so This is a bit of a summary. Okay, we've spent a lot of time considering how to choose the vital few, what things to spend your time on, how to set important goals. So I've summarized all of these key points. You start by changing your frame of thought. Am I choosing to do this? Then you ask, which problem do I want to have? You layer on the focusing question. What is the one thing I can do to move me closer to my goal? And then you ask, can I reframe this problem? Can I ask a better question? Or is this the right goal to have? And finally, am I chasing any sunk costs by continuing to go after this goal or by continuing with this large project? Okay, now the final thing I want to touch on today is this idea. You've got clarity around your goals, your major projects. There's still going to be stuff on your to-do list. We know that. So how do you prioritize what's left? Well, I hope everyone's heard of the Stephen Covey priority matrix. It's amazing, and it can really help us understand where we are putting our energy. So basically, he breaks it up into urgent and not urgent tasks, important and not important tasks. Now, the urgent and important tasks, everyone's going to live there. We know that. You have to do those things. But what I want to talk about is the other quadrants, because the not important quadrants, 3 and 4, are actually distractions and time wasters. We actually want to cut them out altogether, and we want to focus on the important urgent and the important not urgent elements. The things that get deprioritized and pushed out of our to-do list because we're too busy are usually the things in quadrant 2, not urgent but important. These usually have the biggest return if we can have the willpower to stay focused on them. And believe it or not, the more time you spend working on the not urgent but important things, like prevention, capability improvement, relationship building, the urgent but important quadrant starts to get smaller because we're actually preventing things from becoming urgent by preparing and planning and learning. So it's a great way to look at your to-do list. One last little thing is going to be talking about, this is a really easy framework. Okay, you're sitting down at your desk, you're looking at your to-do list, you know what your priorities are. 4 other categories for little to-do list items, okay? You analyze the task, you think, does it take less than 2 minutes to complete? If it does, do it now. Just get it done, less than 2 minutes. Don't write that quick email reminding so-and-so to, just write the email. Start getting in the habit of shooting those things off because they take less than 2 minutes. Next, defer, complete it later. Those are the tasks you write down because they don't need to be done now and it makes sense. Delegate, figuring out who can do it better, faster than you. There's always going to be someone, or hopefully there's someone that you can delegate something to on your team. And then finally, deleting it. Keep that on there. You want to know that some things will be and should be deleted from your to-do list. Just because it's made it onto your to-do list doesn't mean it needs to stay there and get done. Remember, you have to give yourself permission to stop trying to do it all. And that's it. So I've left a summary here of all of the big points. Again, I'll emphasize the one that I use the most, the thing that really, really helps me every day is the focusing question. What is that one thing you can do to move you closer to your goal? And I really recommend that you start saying that frequently, and hopefully it starts to guide you down these other habits of becoming a little bit more of an essentialist. And that is everything I have for today. So if we want to open it up to questions, I would love to, and I'm happy to field any questions you might have.
Fantastic, Kazi. What a great presentation. Lots to chew over there. I see we've got lots of comments and questions coming in, so we'll dive right in. Let's start with goal setting. So we had some questions about setting goals. First off, how specific should you get? How granular should you get with your goal setting? And then also how specific in terms of time frame?
Yeah, so the answer, I think, is it depends. I think some goals are better than no goals. So if you're starting out with goal setting with your team and you've never done it before, I think you should create less granular goals, because what happens is if you get too granular, it's a great activity, but sometimes you can abandon it because it becomes quite a massive onerous task. So something is better than nothing. More granular as you build that into habit and as you become comfortable setting, following, and reviewing goals. More granular and detailed is better because what it gives you is absolute clarity. So I know that was kind of a weird way to say it, but all I'm saying is something is better than nothing. Don't try to go super granular at your first attempt, because I can guarantee you the team will get really into it and then abandon it because it's too much work. So as far as granularity, we use a framework called OKRs. I don't know if anyone's heard of them, but it stands for Objectives and Key Results. And I actually love that framework because it offers one of your goals as your objective. And it's broad and inspirational and sometimes even a little vague, and it's okay because that's your objective. And your key results are what you list. There's anywhere from 3 to 5 key results under every objective, and that's where you get super specific. They're measurable, they're time bound, they're really clear. You can't not understand if you've achieved or not achieved a key result, because by nature it has to be measurable. So that way you can get away from having these like painfully clear goals that kind of lose their inspiration. The objective is inspirational, and then the key results are more tangible. So if you're interested in a great framework, I'd look up OKRs. It's worked brilliantly for our team.
Wonderful. How about procrastination tips? So we have someone in the audience who said, they know that the big things need to get done, but they tend to, wind up focusing on the smaller, easier tasks. Do you have some tips on that?
Yeah, I do. So I guess the first thing is to be really honest with yourself. Why are you procrastinating? And that's important. I think procrastination is psychological, obviously. So what's going on? What's stopping you from tackling those big tasks? And if it comes down to kind of you're nervous or anxious about a task that you might not know how to tackle, so you'd rather tackle something where you've got the experience, you can check it off your list, you can deliver, you're not going to grow that way. So I would challenge you to setting maybe 2-hour blocks of focused time on days where it makes sense, where you can dive into that project. And your goal, maybe you have an accountability partner where you say, at the end of this 2 hours, I'm going to walk through what I've created with you on this project. And that way you don't spend the 2 hours being distracted, reading emails, going back and forth, because at the end of that 2 hours, even if it's a rough draft, even if it's a framework, you're going to have to show something to someone. And the interesting thing about creative work or bigger projects that might be a little daunting is they're some of the most rewarding time we can spend in a day, because what comes out of it is usually this bigger, more satisfying work that it's hard and it can be hard to get started, but once we're doing it, it's actually incredibly inspiring. So you start practicing, and you do that by setting a block, having an accountability partner, and then just showing your progress to someone. Now, if you're in a situation where maybe you're in a more junior role and you don't have the support or someone to explain something to you, and that's why you're procrastinating on the bigger tasks, I think that's a different scenario, and that's where you can ask for that support and just say, this is what I need. Can you provide this to me so I can get this project done well? And I would say, being bold enough to ask for support is a great way to have the confidence to tackle things that you might feel less confident about. But if it's just a question of, you got a million things on your list, you love checking things off because it's satisfying, just be aware of that. Be aware of that being your why, that you're sticking with the little things rather than tackling the big things. You start focusing on the big things, you're going to start to move mountains really quickly, and you'll kind of get addicted to that feeling of, okay, I made so much progress this week because I spent 2 to 4 hours on this big thing, rather than every day doing the little stuff that feels good but doesn't actually make us progress.
Yes, that's great advice. And as we're coming up on the hour, I just want to let folks know we are going to stick around for a little bit longer for questions. So if you do need to run, thank you for joining today, and you will get the full video recording by email later today, and it will include all of this question period, so you'll be able to catch up on anything that you missed. Tazzy, you brought up something really interesting there of somebody potentially being in a more junior position. And we've had a lot of questions coming in that kind of relate to that and the team environment. So I want to bring some of these questions to you. Okay. So first off, do you have recommendations for people who maybe don't have a lot of control over their task list, that their manager is the one who controls their task list? And as kind of a sort of a secondary question to that, we had someone ask, you know, what if also your manager is someone who's kind of apt to chase the, you know, the kind of latest thing, and you're finding yourself very distracted in terms of being able to focus on that task list. So maybe you could tackle that.
Yeah. So I'll take kind of the second one first. So you're talking about like zigzagging priorities, right? Like your manager will say, okay, we're going to do this today, and everyone jumps in and they're motivated, and then all of a sudden, but now we're going to do this. And you're like, but what about this? We were just progressing. Like we had just sunk our teeth into it. Well, we're going to talk about that later. We're going to do this now. And that whiplash, which I think a lot of leaders feel they need to do to capture opportunities, they don't do it to be a jerk. They do it because they're genuinely trying to capture opportunities in real time. They feel the pressure to move quickly. It causes whiplash on the teams. And it's a really demotivating experience because you never really sink your teeth wholly into something because you know it's going to change so quickly that the results of your work are never going to actually come to fruition. And that's not a very motivating thing when you get used to that being the norm. So, I mean, giving your manager that feedback, I think, would be very, very effective. And unfortunately, there isn't really another way. I mean, you can't ignore what they're doing. Maybe you could help them understand, you know, the impact of that whiplash on the team. And what I found really effective is if one person can help that manager be a bit of a buffer. So you say, hey, before we announce new directions to the team, why don't you and I meet? We'll chat through those ideas, and I'll help you understand kind of like which ones I think are going to demotivate the team and which ones I think we can jump into. And just give that manager that kind of buffer insight, or almost like just a sounding board, because some managers don't have that, right? So having a bit of empathy for that kind of that role where you're trying your best to guide a team, not miss out on opportunities. You have all the pressure of the organization, but you don't want to give your team whiplash. So, I mean, it's a role that I think most leaders need, is that person to be a sounding board for new ideas before those new ideas are presented more than half-baked to the team. They should be presented, thought through, developed. You still want collaboration when you're developing ideas, but you don't want to throw half-baked ideas at the team because it really demotivates people. So if you are on a team and feeling like you're in too junior a position, I would take a step and give respectful and empathetic feedback. Your manager's very likely doing the very best they can and don't realize they're having that effect on your team.
Mm.
I feel like I missed the first part of the question, though. There was another one in there.
Yes, well, but that was such an important approach to that second question. So I'm really glad we covered that, because I think that was coming up quite a lot in the questions. So the first part is just a little bit more around, so you don't have control over your task list.
Right.
You know, how do you bring some of this into your daily work, even if, you know, someone else is basically kind of in control of what you're doing each day?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I would challenge you as to why you don't have control. And I mean, if this really is the most junior position, like you're really just starting out, you're given a task list and checking it off day to day, not asking any questions. I mean, that might be a cultural issue where the culture of your organization is really like, they kind of dictate from the top what's going to be done, and that's that. And that just might not be a cultural fit for you. If you're incredibly junior, sometimes going through and doing those tasks without having that control is just the reality for the first few years. But I would argue once you get some experience, once you have a little bit of insight into that role, again, I would challenge it. I would take your to-do list that someone gives you, your manager gives you, and I'd say, this is most important for me. This is why. Can you confirm that I have the right understanding of what our priorities are? I don't understand why you're asking me to do this. Maybe I need more context. Would you be able to provide that for me? And by giving those really kind of, again, respectful but thoughtful questions, you might help your manager with prioritization indirectly, because all of a sudden they're going to try to answer that for you in a way that lets them think about it from more of an essentialist viewpoint.
Excellent. And I think our final question for today, again, one that I think a lot of folks on the call are going to, it's going to resonate for them. So we've got a volunteer manager who's saying that a lot of their work is interrupted. So they're dealing all the time with interruptions from staff and volunteers, asking questions, needing help with things, and they kind of get sucked into this busy work, as they call it, of just dealing with all of these things. And so do you have any suggestions for how to kind of deal with your day if that's your reality?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no company or organization in this world that doesn't want you to do your very best work. That's the truth. They wouldn't have hired you asking you to do less than your very best work. So if you know that you can do better, be more impactful, get more done by kind of owning your schedule, I would make that suggestion and just say, I'm interrupted a lot and it's really stopping me from doing the best work I know I can do. So I'd like to suggest that when I turn my Slack or whatever messaging or email into do not disturb for, let's say, 2 to 3 hours a day, whatever your window might be for doing focused work, I would ask that everyone respects that and only reaches out if it's an emergency. There's not many people that would not appreciate the fact that you are trying to impose some structure and balance in a way that allows you to do more and better work, as long as it's phrased that way, right? So the reality is some roles need to be like, if you're someone's assistant, I don't know if that would work, because the reality is they need you kind of immediately to help with things, and it is more of these kind of urgent tasks. But I mean, if you're trying to get focused work done, I would ask for those windows and ask people to respect them. I know at our organization, we do no meetings Wednesday, and the entire organization has no meetings on Wednesday. Now, we started really strong, and then after about a year, meetings started to creep in because it was the only day everyone was free. And we actually had to say, hey guys, we've noticed that meetings are creeping into Wednesdays. Let's honor this again and make sure we stick to it. Everyone pulled the meetings out of Wednesdays, and now we're kind of going strong again. So it's hard, but it can be something that you really create a boundary around. But then you have to perform, right? You can't create these 2-hour blocks and then turn on Netflix and relax, because someone's quickly going to say, well, this person's not doing any different or more work. In fact, they're doing less. So like, if this is genuinely something that will help you work, I think it's a really brilliant way to put up personal boundaries, and then you can actually become much more productive and grow as an individual, and you'll be more valuable to your team.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tazzy, for another great presentation. You always bring so much wisdom to the presentations you do for us. Did you or Samantha have any final comments before we sign off today?
No, that's everything for me. I just hope everyone can get a lot out of this. I sure do. That's why I teach it, because it worked so well for me and for our team that hopefully everyone here can have a couple takeaways that really help them with their day-to-day.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to remind everyone that you will receive a follow-up email later today with the link to the webinar recording and the slide deck. Please feel free to share that link with your colleagues and your network. It's all publicly available, and I know there was so much great information today that I'm sure a lot of you will want to share with your teams and maybe your managers too. The email will also include a survey link that you can fill out with your feedback on today's webinar, and we'll be sure to share that with Tazzy as well. So on behalf of Charity Village, thank you again for joining us today. We do have a lot of great webinars coming up this spring. You can find more information on all of our webinars at charityvillage.com/webinars. Thank you again for taking part in today's presentation, and I wish all of you a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.